and possibly Paul Murphy will turn up, I'm not sure, but I want to thank Deputy Curran for bringing this motion. It's a very timely motion, and I know it's appreciated hugely by the LES workers throughout the country, and at the gates today we welcome them from as far away as Mayo and from Galway, from Ballyfermot, from Meath, from all over Dublin, as well as from the West. And I think that goes to show the commitment that these individuals have to the job that they do. And I sometimes wonder, when you're in this House, what is really going on, and one of the Sinn Féin deputies touched on it earlier on. I'm going to quote from a lot of different people here, but the first one I want to quote from is the current Taoiseach. Back in 2016, Micheál Martin spoke in favour of the LAS schemes in Cork in his constituency, and I quote, "The reality is we're losing too many community public services. More and more is being lost and is being driven by a government policy that does not value communities or public services. I want to invest in public services. I want a government that values communities and will protect the role of the local employment service and other such schemes that we need operating on the ground." That's the current Taoiseach being quoted. And there's other quotes I can give you from various members of Fianna Fáil. One very famous one, who we all know where he stands on this issue, Willie O'D from Limerick. "I have always had instinctive reservations about the idea of the private sector being involved in job activation on behalf of the state. There is obviously a conflict between a company providing a services whose main objective is to make profit and the needs of the individual whom the company is supposed to serve." Now, what is going on in this House? When I quote to the Taoiseach and a leading member, a long-time member of Fianna Fáil, who would absolutely back up this motion with those quotes, and you, as the Minister, stand there and absolutely tear apart what the LES stand for. Now, you might say that you're letting it out to privatisation, but you must do this because the Attorney-General advised you to. What I can't find in your speech is why and what prompted the Attorney-General to give you such advice. You did not tell us that. It is not in your speech, and it is not clear why, when something is working and it doesn't need to be fixed, why you are breaking it up. And that is exactly what you're doing with the local employment community services by tendering it out. For me, this is pure Fine Gael ideology, and it harks right back to Noonan when he was Minister for Finance and said, "We must pick the low-hanging fruit first." And you haven't stopped picking the low-hanging fruit. You're doing it with the local employment schemes, and you intend doing it with the local drug task force later on this year. So I think we need to really check ourselves and see what's going on here. The ideology that goes after the most vulnerable, the most marginalised, is just not tolerable. And there's a sense of class snobbery from Fine Gael that you don't really get what goes on in communities like Cherry Orchard, like Ballyfermot. You don't really understand it. And I want to further quote from an LES worker that might really put it up to you. "Payment fair client pushes those that are most vulnerable and distant from the labour market further down the list. If we are dependent on payments for progressions, it only makes sense to focus on those that need little support to get employment. So who's going to focus on those with the greatest barriers to employment? The Minister has recently increased places on community employment. However, as referrals to CE are not financially beneficial to a service, why would the service make such referrals? Also, as CE must meet targets and get participants into work, CE schemes themselves will be selective in who they take on, again pushing those furthest from the labour market further away down the list." I'm going to have to finish sooner than I thought because my colleague has arrived, but I want to finish with another quote, and it's from, I'm not sure when it was written, but it's from Seamus Feely, who worked in the office of the Taoiseach, and he wrote a paper called "The Origins and Context of Local Employment Services." In essence, he said, local employment services grow out of the recognition that there's no mechanical quick-fix solutions to the problems of long-term unemployment. The solution requires a considered and intensive response that takes full account of its complexity and the reasons for its persistence. Its success will require all actors to work closely together to deliver a coordinated and person-centred service. It will require flexibility in the nature and delivery of services and and recognition that no one agency acting on its own can solve the problem. Finally, Minister, I would like to recommend to you, if you haven't already done so, to watch Ken Loach's film, I, Daniel Blake, and it will put into absolute context for you where this Tory-driven, privatised, tender-out idea on local employment services and other needs of the most marginalised and the most vulnerable leads. I really do recommend you watch it, because that's the rabbit hole this government is going down if it pushes forward with this proposal.